A single dad, 10 years of scrubbing toilets at dawn. A CEO who thought he was looking at just a janitor. But when one broken pipe forces a corporate building into chaos, one quiet man's hidden past, a PhD and $5 million in savings comes to light, and it changes the company, a little girl, and the CEO himself forever. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. The first thing you noticed about Ethan Hale wasn't his face. It was the sound. The soft swish of a mop on marble floors before sunrise. The click of a cartwheel that had a stubborn wobble. The hush of paper towels being stacked with the kind of care you'd expect from someone folding a child's clothes, not restocking a restroom. At 4:47 a.m., the Caldwell and Pierce Tower was mostly asleep, 34 floors of glass and steel hovering over the city like a polished promise. But Ethan was already there. He wore the same Navy uniform he'd worn for 10 years, same ID badge, same worn work shoes with a tiny split near the toe that he kept meaning to replace, and the same expression, calm, neutral, invisible. Because invisible was safe. Invisible meant no one asked questions. Invisible meant no one looked too closely at the way he read warning labels faster than most people read emails, or the way he spoke to maintenance staff using the exact right terms, or the way he sometimes paused beside the lobby's framed company mission statement as if it was written in a language he used to speak fluently. Integrity, excellence, leadership. Words on a wall. Ethan pushed his cart toward the men's restroom on floor 3, executive suites. The air smelled like lemon disinfectant and the faint metallic bite of early morning HVAC. He checked the supplies with a practiced glance. Gloves, bleach, sanitizer, trash bags, polish. And then he began. Toilets, sinks, mirrors, floors. The work was physical, repetitive, unforgiving, but it was honest. And honest was something Ethan trusted, because 10 years ago, honesty was all he'd had left. By 6:10 a.m., the building started waking up. Security guards greeting him with nods, early employees rushing in with coffee and earbuds and eyes that never really landed on him. And then there was the one person who always did. A little girl with a pink backpack and a ponytail that never stayed neat for more than 5 minutes. "Mr. Ethan!" she called as soon as the elevator opened. Ethan turned and something softened in his face instantly. "Good morning, Peanut," he said. Lily Hale, 8 years old, bounded towards him, hugging him like he wasn't wearing a uniform that smelled faintly of bleach. "I brought you something." She dug into her bag and pulled out a slightly crumpled drawing. "It's you!" Ethan crouched to her level, taking the paper carefully like it was a document that mattered. It showed a stick figure with a mop, but the stick figure had a cape. "Whoa!" Ethan whispered, eyes widening with theatrical awe. "A superhero?" Lily beamed, her face light up like she'd won something. He tapped the drawing. "This cape is very accurate." "I made it extra long," she said seriously, "because you do extra work." Ethan's smile faltered for half a second, so quick Lily didn't notice. But he did. Extra work. That was what people called it when your life was heavier than it looked. "Ready for school?" he asked. Lily made a face. "I guess." Ethan pretended to sigh dramatically. "Tragic. Another day of learning." "I hate math," Lily whispered, as if it was a confession. Ethan leaned closer. "Math is just a puzzle, and you're good at puzzles." She narrowed her eyes. "You always say that." "Because it's true." Lily hugged him again. "Okay, but promise you'll pick me up today, not Uncle Mark." Ethan's chest tightened. "I promise." She studied his face like she could see the truth under his words. Kids always could. "Okay," she said finally. "I trust you." And then she skipped away toward the building's daycare center on the second floor, because Ethan worked 2 shifts and couldn't afford anything else. He watched her go, his heart doing that familiar ache and warmth combination. Then he stood and returned to his cart. invisible again. At 8:30 a.m., Julian Caldwell stepped out of the private elevator on the 34th floor like a man stepping into a life he'd paid for. Julian was 42, sharp-suited, sharp-eyed, and sharp in the way people became when they'd spent too long believing weakness was a choice. He didn't smile at receptionists unless it was strategic. He didn't ask small-talk questions because he didn't care about the answers. And he didn't believe in surprises. Surprises meant a lack of control. His assistant, Nina, followed him with a tablet. "Your 9 o'clock is confirmed, your 10:30 is moved to Friday, and the investors from Seattle are arriving at 1. Julian nodded, already reading an email. "Good." Nina hesitated. "Also, facilities flagged a potential plumbing issue on floor 3. Julian's jaw tightened. "A plumbing issue on executive suites?" "Just a warning sign," Nina said. "They're investigating." Julian's jaw tightened. "Make sure it's handled before investors arrive." "Yes, sir." Julian moved toward his office, glass walls, skyline view, the kind of space meant to remind you that you were above ordinary problems. He didn't notice the man pushing a cleaning cart down the hallway outside. He didn't notice the careful way that man glanced at a maintenance panel and frowned. And he definitely didn't notice that the man's hands, gloved and holding a mop, moved like someone used to delicate instruments, not just cleaning tools. Because to Julian, a janitor was a janitor, and a janitor was invisible. The first scream came at 11:07. It echoed down floor 3's hallway like a warning. Then the alarms, not fire, water sensors. And then the smell hit. Not just clean water, something worse. A pipe in the executive restroom had burst. Not a simple leak, a full rupture. Water gushed out from behind a wall panel, pouring into the hallway, soaking carpets, creeping toward the elevator bank. Employees stumbled back, shouting, confused. Someone yelled for maintenance. Someone yelled for that cleaning guy. Ethan arrived in under a minute. He didn't run like a panicked employee. He moved fast like someone trained to respond. He knelt, assessed the flow, checked the panel with a glance. His mind was already mapping the building layout, the shutoff valves, the pressure points. He turned to the nearest employee. "Get me a wrench and tell maintenance to kill the main line for this wing, now." The employee blinked. What?" Ethan's voice stayed calm, but it had an edge that made people obey. "Now, please." The employee ran. Ethan pulled open his cart, grabbed heavy-duty absorbent pads, and began directing 2 other cleaners like a field commander. "Pads here. Block the elevator threshold. Towels near the corner. Don't let it hit the electrical panel." A young intern stared. "How do you—" Ethan didn't answer. The water kept coming. Then Julian Caldwell appeared. The CEO's shoes hit the wet carpet, and he froze in horror as water surged toward his polished elevator doors. "What the hell is happening?" Julian snapped. People turned. The hallway suddenly felt smaller. Ethan stood, dripping water on his gloves, eyes scanning. He didn't flinch at the CEO's presence. "A pipe rupture," Ethan said. "If we don't shut it down in 60 seconds, it reaches the electrical panel and we lose half the floor." Julian's gaze flicked to him. "Who are you?" "Ethan, facilities." Julian looked disgusted. "Where is maintenance?" "On the way." Julian's voice rose. "This floor has investors coming in 2 hours." Ethan didn't react to the threat in the words. "Then we need the shutoff valve. It's behind that panel." Julian stared. "How do you know?" Ethan's eyes met his briefly. "Because I've seen the building schematics." That should have been impossible. A janitor didn't have access to schematics. Julian opened his mouth to demand an explanation, and then the wall panel blew. A spray of water burst out, slamming into Julian's suit. For a moment, the CEO just stood there, drenched, staring like the universe had personally insulted him. Ethan moved instantly. He grabbed Julian's arm, pulling him back from the electrical panel with surprising strength. "Sir, Move." Julian stumbled back, furious. "Don't touch me." Ethan released him immediately, but his eyes stayed on the danger. "I'm trying to keep you alive." The hallway fell silent. Julian's face twisted, half rage, half shock. "Excuse me?" Ethan didn't repeat it. He turned back to the leak. Maintenance finally arrived, panicking, fumbling. Ethan pointed. "Main shutoff. You need to turn it counterclockwise. Hard. The pressure is high." The maintenance worker stared. "How do you—" "Just do it." They did. The water slowed, then stopped. The hallway was soaked. People stood in stunned silence. The crisis had been prevented by a man in a janitor uniform. Julian stared at Ethan like he was seeing him for the first time. And in a way, he was. An hour later, Julian stood in his office, towel pressed to his hair, suit jacket hanging on a chair like an insult. Nina hovered anxiously. "We can move the investors to the conference room on 28. Facilities is—" Julian held up a hand. "Who is Ethan?" Nina blinked. "Sir?" Julian's voice was dangerously calm. "The janitor on floor 3, the one who just prevented us from losing power. Who is he?" Nina tapped quickly on her tablet. "Ethan Hale, contracted cleaning staff for 10 years. No disciplinary issues. Perfect attendance." Julian's frown grew. 10 years? "Yes. Single father, 1 daughter in the building daycare." Julian's eyes narrowed. "Get me his file." Nina hesitated. "It's just employment paperwork." "Then it should be easy." When Nina returned with a thin folder, Julian flipped through it. Basic forms, emergency contact, salary history. Nothing special. But then, something caught his eye. A section labeled Education. It was blank. Julian's brow furrowed. Why would this be blank? Nina shrugged carefully. "Some contractors don't list it." Julian stared at the blank line like it was a lie. He didn't know why it bothered him. Maybe because the man's voice didn't match his uniform. Maybe because the man spoke like someone who'd been in boardrooms before. Julian leaned back, thinking. Then he made a decision. "Find out," he said quietly. Nina's eyes widened. "Sir, find out who Ethan Hale is." That evening, Ethan picked Lily up from daycare as promised. Lily ran to him, hair wild, cheeks flushed. "Mr. Ethan! Daddy! You're late, but you promised and you came." Ethan scooped her up, kissing her forehead. "I said I would." Lily's eyes searched his face. "Something happened today." Ethan froze. "What makes you say that?" She pointed at his hand. "You have a scratch, and you smell extra like lemon." Ethan laughed softly. "We had a plumbing emergency." Lily made a face. "Gross. Very gross." They walked outside into the cool evening. The city lights shimmered like distant stars. Lily chattered about school, but Ethan's mind was still on the flood, the CEO's stare, the way the hallway had gone quiet when he spoke. Lily tugged his sleeve. "Daddy?" "Yeah, Peanut?" "Why do you clean toilets?" Ethan's steps slowed. He'd expected that question eventually. He just hadn't expected it at 8. "Because it pays," he said gently, "and because it's honest work." Lily frowned. "But you're smart." Ethan swallowed. "Smart people can still clean toilets." "But you read my science book like the teacher," Lily pressed. Ethan looked down at her. "I like science." Lily's voice dropped like a secret. "Are you hiding?" The word hit him like a punch. Ethan stopped walking. He stared at his daughter, this little person who somehow saw through everything. He wanted to lie, but Lily didn't like lies. Lily could smell lies the way she smelled lemon disinfectant. So Ethan knelt beside her and said softly, "Sometimes adults hide when they're tired." Lily's eyes filled with something too wise. "But I don't want you to be tired forever." Ethan's throat tightened. "Me neither." She wrapped her arms around his neck, eyes burning. And somewhere, far above them, in a glass office, a CEO was asking questions that would make hiding impossible. 2 days later, Nina stood in Julian's office with a strange expression. "I found something," she said carefully. Julian looked up. "Spit it out." Nina placed a printed page on his desk. It was a dissertation record. Doctor of Philosophy, PhD, Ethan Marcus Hale, Field, Environmental Engineering, University, Westbridge Institute of Technology, Year, 2010. Julian stared. "That's not possible," he said quietly. Nina continued, voice low. "He published 3 papers. He was on track for a faculty position." Julian's mind raced. Then why is he cleaning toilets? Nina swallowed. There's more. She slid another document. A news article from years ago. A corporate scandal, a whistleblower, an investigation. Julian read quickly, jaw tightening. Ethan Hale had once worked for a major corporation, one Julian recognized. He'd been an engineer, a rising star. Then he'd reported environmental data falsification. The company had retaliated, career destroyed, blacklisted, lawsuits, settlement sealed. Julian looked up slowly. He was punished for telling the truth. Nina nodded. Looks like it. Julian leaned back, staring at the ceiling like it might answer the question he couldn't say out loud. Because Julian had built his entire success on a different kind of truth. The kind you controlled. The kind you shaped. And here was a man who'd lost everything because he refused to shape it. Julian's voice came out rough. "Bring him to me." Nina blinked. "Sir, he's contracted cleaning staff." Julian's eyes were cold. "Bring him to me anyway." Ethan was wiping down a hallway rail when security approached. "Hale?" the guard said awkwardly. "CEO wants to see you." Ethan's stomach dropped. For a moment, 10 years collapsed into one memory. Corporate offices, legal letters, being escorted out. His hands stayed steady, though. "Okay," he said. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like stepping into a version of himself he'd buried. Glass walls, soft carpet, air that smelled like money and espresso. Nina led him into Julian's office. Julian stood by the window, hands in pockets, city spread behind him like an empire. He turned slowly. Ethan met his gaze without flinching. Julian held up the dissertation printout. "This is you?" Ethan's face didn't change. "Yes." Julian's voice sharpened. "You have a PhD?" "Yes." Julian stared like he expected Ethan to beg for recognition, but Ethan didn't. Julian leaned forward. "Then why have you been cleaning toilets for 10 years? Ethan exhaled, slow, controlled. "Because my daughter needed health insurance." Julian blinked. Ethan's eyes stayed calm, but there was something underneath. Steel. "I tried to work in my field," Ethan continued. "I was blacklisted. Quietly. Nobody admitted it. Offers vanished. Interviews became, 'We'll call you.' They never did." Julian's jaw clenched. "Because you reported environmental fraud." Ethan's gaze flickered, the smallest sign of pain. "Yes." Julian's voice lowered. "And you just accepted this?" Ethan's mouth twitched, humorless. "I accepted that my child needed food and stability more than I needed pride." Silence hung between them. Julian looked away, suddenly uncomfortable, like he'd been handed a truth he didn't know how to hold. Then he asked the question he didn't mean to ask. "How much do you have saved?" Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" Julian shrugged, masking curiosity as strategy. "A man who lives on janitor pay for 10 years but doesn't look desperate. You didn't spend like everyone else." Ethan hesitated. Then, as if deciding Julian deserved honesty or deserved discomfort, he said quietly, "5 million." Julian froze. "What?" Ethan spoke calmly. "I lived small. I invested the settlement. Index funds, municipal bonds, diversified. No lifestyle creep." Julian stared. The numbers didn't make sense with the uniform. Ethan's voice stayed even. I didn't want my daughter to ever be at the mercy of anyone again. Something moved in Julian's expression. Not pity, respect, and something like shame. Julian cleared his throat. You could leave. Ethan's eyes held his. Yes, I could. Julian's voice came out sharp. Then why didn't you? Ethan's answer was simple. Because stability is worth more than dignity when you're raising a child alone. Julian looked down at the papers on his desk. Then he said, I want you to work here. Ethan didn't react. Julian continued, faster now, like momentum would keep him from thinking too hard. I'm building a sustainability division, real, not PR, and I need someone who's not afraid to tell the truth. Ethan stared. Julian's eyes met his. Your job title won't be janitor. Ethan's voice was quiet. My job title hasn't changed who I am. Julian's jaw flexed. No, but it changed how people treated you. Ethan's face tightened. Because that was true. And it hurt. Julian stepped closer. Come work with me. Name your terms. Ethan's hands purled slightly at his sides. He thought of Lily's face. Stop hiding. He swallowed. I'll consider it, he said. Julian nodded once, like that was a victory. But it wasn't. Not yet. Word spread fast. It always did. The janitor met with the CEO. The janitor had a PhD. The janitor wasn't just anything. By the end of the week, Ethan noticed the stares. Some were curious. Some were impressed. Some were hostile. Because people didn't like finding out they'd been ignoring someone intelligent. It made them feel smaller. And then there was Gavin Pierce, Julian's co-founder. Gavin was the kind of man who smiled like a knife. He cornered Julian in the hallway. You're promoting a janitor? Julian's voice stayed calm. I'm hiring an engineer. Gavin scoffed. A disgraced whistleblower. Julian's eyes hardened. A whistleblower who was right. Gavin stepped closer. You're turning this company into a charity project. Julian's face didn't change. No, I'm turning it into a company that won't get sued into the ground in 5 years. Gavin's smile thinned. Careful. You start digging into environmental compliance, you might find things you don't want to find. Julian stared. Is that a threat? Gavin shrugged. It's advice. Julian watched him walk away, and something cold settled in his stomach. Because suddenly, Ethan's story didn't feel like the past. It felt like a warning. One Saturday, Lily begged to come to Daddy's work, even though it was her normal place. Ethan was going in to finish a deep cleaning shift. He hesitated, then agreed. The building was quieter on weekends. The elevators sounded lonely. Lily held his hand tightly as they rode up. When the doors opened on the 34th floor, Lily gasped. It's like a spaceship, she whispered. Ethan smiled. Sort of. They walked past glass offices. Lily's sneakers squeaked softly on carpet. Then Julian stepped out of his office and froze. He hadn't expected Ethan to bring a child. Lily looked up at Julian with immediate curiosity. Kids didn't care about power, only presence. Hi, she said. Julian blinked, thrown off. Hello. Lily tilted her head. Are you the boss? Julian almost laughed. Almost. I'm the boss, yes. Lily nodded solemnly. Okay, don't be mean to my dad. The words hit like a dart. Julian stared at Ethan, who looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Lily, Ethan murmured. But Lily wasn't done. He cleans toilets, she said, as if it was a heroic title. He's the toilet defender. Julian's mouth twitched. And he promised he'll stop hiding, Lily added quietly, like she was sharing a secret. Ethan's breath caught. Julian's eyes sharpened. Hiding? Ethan's voice was low. Kids say things. Lily squeezed Ethan's hand. You are hiding, but you're still my favorite. Julian looked at Ethan with something unreadable. Then he crouched slightly, lowering himself to Lily's level, an action that surprised even him. "What's your name?" Julian asked. "Lily," she said proudly. "I'm 8. I'm learning fractions, but they're evil." Julian nodded, like that was the most reasonable statement he'd heard all week. "Agreed." Lily's eyes widened. "You think fractions are evil too?" Julian said, "I respect their ability to confuse adults." Lily giggled. Ethan watched, stunned, because Julian Caldwell didn't seem like a man who giggled with children. And yet, there it was, something human. Julian stood. "Ethan," he said, voice quieter, "we should talk Monday, officially." Ethan nodded, throat tight. "Okay." As they left, Lily whispered, "He's not that scary." Ethan managed a small smile. "No, maybe he's not." Lily squeezed his hand again. "Good, because if he's mean, I'll bite him." Ethan choked on a laugh. "Please don't." "No promises," Lily said, deadly serious. On Monday, Ethan showed up, not in his janitor uniform. He wore a simple button-down shirt, dark slacks, clean shoes. He didn't look like a CEO, but he didn't look invisible anymore either. People stared. Julian met him in a conference room, Nina present, a few executives watching like this was a strange experiment. Julian spoke first. "This is Ethan Hale. He will be consulting on our sustainability compliance and internal auditing." Someone cleared their throat. "Consulting?" Julian's voice sharpened. "Yes." Ethan said nothing. He simply opened a folder and slid documents across the table. The documents were clean, detailed, brutal. Julian watched executives' faces shift as they read. "Where did you get this?" someone demanded. Ethan's voice was calm. "From your own data, you weren't looking at it correctly." A man scoffed. "A janitor thinks he can—" Julian cut him off. "He's not a janitor." Ethan's eyes flickered to Julian. Julian continued, voice controlled. "And even if he were, it wouldn't make him wrong." Silence. Ethan spoke softly. "There are compliance risks in your vendor chain. If you don't address them now, it becomes a public scandal later." Gavin Pierce, seated at the end, leaned back with an amused smile. "And you're the expert?" Ethan's gaze met his. "Yes." Gavin's smile stayed. "Because you have a PhD." Ethan's voice didn't change. "Because I've seen what happens when companies lie." Julian watched Gavin carefully. Because Gavin's eyes, just for a second, looked nervous. 2 weeks later, a rumor hit the company like poison. Ethan Hale was fired for fraud. Ethan Hale fabricated his credentials. Ethan Hale is manipulating Julian. It wasn't subtle. It was targeted. Ethan heard it in whispers, saw it in the way people stepped away. He tried to ignore it, but Lily didn't. One afternoon, Lily came out of daycare with red eyes. Ethan's heart stopped. "Peanut, what happened?" Lily sniffed. "A lady said you're not really smart. She said you're lying." Ethan's chest tightened. He crouched. "Who said that?" Lily hesitated. "I'm not supposed to say names." Ethan forced calm. "Okay, you don't have to." Lily's voice shook. "Are you lying?" Ethan's eyes burned, because that question, the one he'd feared, had finally arrived. He took Lily's small hands in his. "No," he said firmly, "I'm not lying." Lily stared hard. "Then why do they say it?" Ethan swallowed. "Because some adults get scared when the story changes." Lily blinked. "What story?" Ethan's voice softened. "The story that says people like me should stay quiet." Lily's chin lifted. "That's a dumb story." Ethan laughed, watery. "Yeah, it is." She leaned into him. "You should tell the boss." Ethan froze. Because telling Julian meant war. But maybe war was already here. That night, Ethan emailed Julian, "We need to talk, now." Julian met Ethan in the office after hours. The building was quiet, lights dimmed, city humming beyond glass. Ethan placed a folder on the table. Julian opened it. Inside were legal documents, settlement agreements, retaliation evidence, employment rejections. Julian looked up. "Someone is running a smear campaign." Ethan nodded. "Yes." Julian's jaw tightened. "Gavin." Ethan's eyes didn't confirm it, but they didn't deny it either. Julian leaned forward. "Why didn't you tell me all of this?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "Because I didn't want pity." Julian's eyes flashed. "This isn't pity, this is sabotage inside my company." Ethan's expression tightened. "Welcome to what my life looked like 10 years ago." Julian went still. Ethan continued, voice controlled, but pain edged the words. "They didn't just ruin my career, they tried to erase me, make me disappear." Julian stared. "And you survived." Ethan's voice cracked, barely. "Because I had a daughter." Julian swallowed hard. Because suddenly, this wasn't about compliance reports. This was about survival. Julian said quietly, "I'm sorry." Ethan's gaze held his. "Don't be sorry, be useful." Julian blinked. Then he nodded. "Okay." Julian didn't storm into Gavin's office. He didn't shout. He did something worse. He collected evidence. He used Ethan's methods. Emails, vendor contracts, anonymous tip lines. And in the process, Julian found something that made his blood run cold. Gavin had been falsifying sustainability compliance reports for 2 years. Not just minor errors, systematic lies. The kind of lies that could destroy the company if exposed. Julian sat in his office at midnight, staring at the proof. Nina's voice was shaky. "Sir, what do you want to do?" Julian's face was stone. "I want to do the right thing." Nina swallowed. "That will blow up everything." Julian thought of Ethan's decade of toilets, Ethan's decade of silence, Ethan's decade of being punished for doing the right thing. Julian exhaled. "Then we blow it up." The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. Gavin walked in, confident, smiling, like a man who believed he owned the room. Julian sat at the head of the table. Ethan sat beside him, not as a janitor, not as a ghost, as a witness. Julian began calmly. "We have a compliance issue." Gavin chuckled. "Again with this?" Julian slid the documents across the table. Gavin's smile faded. Julian's voice stayed controlled. "You falsified reports." Gavin's jaw flexed. "You're accusing me?" Julian looked him dead in the eye. "I'm presenting evidence." The board members read. Faces paled. Gavin's voice sharpened. "This is a setup." Julian nodded slightly. "Yes, it is. The setup you tried to use on Ethan 10 years ago." Silence exploded. Gavin's eyes snapped to Ethan. Hatred. Fear. Julian continued. "You tried to destroy him because he told the truth. You tried to destroy him again because his presence reminded you of what you are." Gavin's smile turned desperate. "Julian, think about what you're doing. Investors." Julian's voice cut like steel. "I am thinking." He leaned forward. "You are out." Gavin's face contorted. "You can't!" Julian lifted a hand. "Security." Gavin stood abruptly. "This company is mine, too!" Julian's eyes didn't blink. "Not anymore." Gavin was escorted out. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then one board member whispered, "Who is Ethan?" Julian's voice softened just slightly. "The man who cleaned our toilets for 10 years while we pretended not to see him." Ethan stared at the table, jaw tight. Julian added, and the man who saved this company. After the meeting, Julian found Ethan standing by the elevator, hands in pockets, face unreadable. Julian's voice was low. "It's done." Ethan nodded. "Okay?" Julian hesitated. "I owe you more than a job." Ethan's eyes flicked up. "I'm not looking for charity." Julian's throat tightened. "Not charity, respect, and apology." Ethan went still. Julian said quietly, "I treated you like you were invisible." Ethan didn't answer immediately. Then he said softly, "Most people did." Julian's voice cracked slightly, surprising them both. "That doesn't make it okay." Ethan exhaled. He looked tired, not physically, emotionally. "Julian," he said, "if you really want to make it right, make a place where people like me don't have to hide." Julian nodded slowly. "I will." 3 months later, Ethan's life looked different. He had an office now, a title, a salary he didn't need but accepted anyway. But the biggest difference wasn't the job. It was the way he walked through the building. He looked up now. He met people's eyes. He wasn't invisible anymore. One evening, Lily sat at their small kitchen table doing homework. Ethan cooked spaghetti, because spaghetti was cheap and Lily loved it. The apartment smelled like garlic and tomato sauce. Lily frowned at her worksheet. Fractions are still evil. Ethan leaned over her shoulder. "Let's defeat them." Lily giggled. Then a knock came at the door. Ethan opened it and froze. Julian Caldwell stood there, holding a small paper bag. Ethan blinked. "What are you doing here?" Julian looked awkward, which was a new look on him. "Nina said you forgot your—" He held up a folder. "Vendor audit notes." Ethan stared. "You came to my apartment to deliver notes?" Julian shrugged, stiff. "Yes." Lily peeked around Ethan's leg. "Boss, boss." Julian's face softened instantly. "Hello, Lily." Lily spotted the paper bag. "Is that food?" Julian cleared his throat. "It's cheesecake." Lily's eyes widened like he'd offered treasure. "Cheesecake is not evil." Ethan laughed despite himself. "Come in." Julian stepped inside, looking around at the tiny apartment. Second-hand couch, mismatched dishes, Lily's drawings on the fridge. His expression shifted. Not judgment, understanding. Ethan felt it. Julian handed over the folder. Then he stood awkwardly, like he didn't know where to put his hands. Ethan said softly, "You okay?" Julian exhaled. "I don't know." Lily climbed onto the couch, already pulling out plates like she owned the place. Ethan watched her, then looked back at Julian. "What's wrong?" Julian hesitated. Then he said quietly, "I keep thinking about 10 years. Ethan's face tightened. "Don't." Julian's eyes held his. "I should have seen you." Ethan's voice was low. "You weren't supposed to. People like me are designed to be background." Julian shook his head, jaw tight. "That's a disgusting sentence." Ethan's throat tightened unexpectedly. Lily called out, "Daddy, boss, come eat cheesecake before it gets sad." Both men paused. Then Julian laughed, a real laugh. Ethan felt something in his chest loosen. They sat at the tiny table, 3 people eating cheesecake like it was a celebration. Lily talked nonstop about school, about fractions, about her dream of being a science doctor who also has a cape. Julian listened like it mattered. Because it did. When Lily finally ran off to brush her teeth, Julian's voice went quiet. "I have something for you," he said. Ethan's brows rose. "What?" Julian pulled out a small envelope. "A scholarship fund for employees' kids. Full tuition, not charity. Earned." Ethan stared. Julian's eyes were steady. "I'm starting it in Lily's name. She inspired it." Ethan's voice shook. "Julian?" Julian swallowed. "And I'm promoting you, officially, Director of Sustainability and Ethics." Ethan stared, stunned. Julian's voice was quiet. "You stopped hiding. I'm not going to let them push you back into the shadows." Ethan's eyes burned. Then he whispered, "Thank you." Julian nodded, then stood. "I should go." Ethan walked him to the door. Julian hesitated there, hand on the knob. Then he said softly, "Ethan, I've never been proud of anything I've built the way I'm proud of this." Ethan's throat tightened. "This?" Julian nodded. "The chance to do it right." He left. Ethan stood there for a long moment, heart heavy and warm. Then Lily's voice floated down the hallway. "Daddy? Is he gone?" Ethan smiled. "Yeah." Lily sighed dramatically. "Okay, but I like him." Ethan laughed. "Good." Lily paused. "Daddy?" "Yeah, Peanut?" "Are you still hiding?" Ethan looked at the envelope in his hands. Then he said quietly, "No." Lily's voice was satisfied. "Good, because hiding is dumb." Ethan's eyes burned again, but this time it felt like relief. A year later, the Caldwell and Pierce Tower looked the same from the outside. Glass, steel, skyline. But inside, things were different. The scholarship fund helped dozens of employees' children. The sustainability division became real, audited, transparent, accountable. And Ethan? Ethan still walked past the restroom on floor 3 sometimes. He'd pause, hear the swish of a mop, and remember the decade he spent invisible. He didn't resent it anymore. It had built something in him. Patience, humility, endurance. One afternoon, Ethan stood in the lobby waiting for Lily. She ran toward him, older now, still wild-haired, still bright. "Daddy, guess what?" Ethan smiled. "What?" "I got an A in math," she announced like she'd conquered a dragon. Ethan laughed. "Fractions surrender?" "They were terrified," she said proudly. Julian walked into the lobby then, suit crisp, expression softer than it used to be. Lily waved. "Boss, boss!" Julian waved back. "Hello." Lily looked between them, suspicious. "You two are weird." Ethan raised a brow. "Excuse me?" Lily crossed her arms. "Because you look at each other like you're thinking too loud." Julian choked on a laugh. Ethan turned red. "We are not." Lily nodded as if confirming her theory. "Okay, whatever, but I drew you something." She pulled out another picture. This time, it was Ethan in a suit, but still with a cape. And beside him was Julian, also with a cape. The caption, in crooked handwriting, read, "The people who finally saw." Ethan swallowed hard. Julian stared at the drawing, throat tight. Lily smiled, satisfied. "Now you're both heroes." Ethan knelt, hugging her. "Thank you, Peanut." Julian's voice was quiet. "That's perfect." Lily shrugged like it was obvious. "Yeah, I know." She grabbed Ethan's hand. "Come on, we have to go. I have science club." Ethan stood, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was living. And if you asked him what changed everything, he'd tell you it wasn't the CEO discovering his PhD. It wasn't the $5 million. It was the moment his daughter asked him at 8 years old if he was hiding. Because sometimes the bravest person in the story isn't the CEO. It's the child who refuses to let the people she loves stay invisible. If this story touched your heart, reminded you that dignity isn't a job title, and that quiet people often carry the loudest strength, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe, because every week we tell stories that prove kindness, courage, and integrity can change everything. Sometimes, all it takes is one person who finally sees you.